Welcome to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast, brought to you by your friends at Finding Balance. I'm your host, Chrissy Kirkman. On this show, we kick it as old school as it gets with how God created us to live, free from dieting, food rules, and body shame. Ready to replace the old soundtrack of cultural lies with biblical truth? Let's start with this. You don't have to be trapped by food struggles. You were created to be free. God adores you and wants you to experience the fullness of life without body hatred or bondage to dieting. The time is now to take a step toward the life you were created for. We're so glad you're here with us today. Let's get into today's episode. If you're anything like me, mealtime can be such a challenge, especially when you feel mentally drained, when nothing really sounds good, and you're just flat out overwhelmed by decision fatigue. Well, today, Ann Kent and I want to show you a great way to remove the burden of meal planning and get a quick and nourishing dinner on the table in the most non-diet culture-y way. Wouldn't you like to enjoy more variety at meals without having to do it all yourself? Well, it sure has helped me. Oh, and do not miss the fantastic freebie at the end of this episode. You're gonna love it. Hey, Ann Kent, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Oh, I am so excited for this episode because here we are, another new year, and the frenzy is happening. We gotta diet, we gotta lose weight. I'm not saying we have to do any of these things, right? We don't have to do them, actually.
But there's a lot of noise.
The noise is real. The pressure is real. And a lot of people might be like me and feel like mealtime is such a challenge. Mealtime feels so hard, whether you are single, it might be you and your spouse, it might be you and a family, and picky eaters. Mealtime in general can be difficult, but then when you have recovery of an eating disorder or you're trying to get out of diet culture and you really just want to learn how to be an intuitive eater or how to balance meals that nourish your body, that actually nourish your body and make you feel better and make your brain function better and all the things, it can be overwhelming. So my friend Ann is here today to talk through some of these ways to make it better and easier for a fresh start for 2025. This is a really good fresh start because it actually helps. It's not like those diet traps that only leave you feeling like a failure, feeling more miserable, deeper down into that pit of dieting mess that we really just want to be out of. So that's what we're talking about today. Ann Kent is a registered dietitian and the owner of Peas and Hoppiness. I'm going to have her explain that title because it's really cute. She makes mealtime easier for busy families with her non-diet meal planning app, the Peas and Hoppy Meal Guides. Ann earned her master's degree in nutrition and dietetics from the University of Kansas Medical Center and spent over a decade working as a certified diabetes care and education specialist before starting her business. Most recently, she completed her training as a certified intuitive eating counselor. Hey, Ann.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled that you're here. So before we get into the real meat and potatoes, let me ask you our kickoff question. What old school item or experience do you miss from back in the day?
I have been thinking about this all weekend, and the thing that keeps coming back in my mind are those light bright machines. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah.
It was like artwork that you could do over and over and over. My grandma got one at a garage sale and had random already done the holes were already poked out in the designs, but you could do them over and over.
Fantastic.
I don't know if you remember it, but it was
yes.
A light machine.
Oh, I loved it.
So anyway, it was like a paint by number, except you could do it over and over. So it's so fun.
Yeah. And you could turn the lights out and your project just came to life and you could just spend hours looking at what you just created, pre-done, but so fabulous. Yes. Loved it. Okay. So let's just make mealtime easier in general. What do you say? I think it would be really helpful for a lot of us who struggle with just the mental things that happen here. So we're going to tell you first why this matters. So there's a lot of common mealtime struggles, areas of overwhelm when it comes to mealtime. Like, Anne, will you just share some of those with us? Like, what do you see with your clients? What are they struggling with?
Absolutely. I created this because like everybody used to come to me with this question of like, just give me a meal plan. Please just tell me what to eat. And I think that there is on some level, every one of us feels that at sometimes because we're so tired of making decisions. So whether you're doing that for yourself, whether you have a health condition, which you need to try to manage, or you're making decisions for your family and trying to manage a budget and time and all of these different things. So I think one of the biggest things that I hear over and over is I'm just tired of choosing. I have like decision fatigue. I make all these decisions. So that can be a really big one with mealtime. Another one that I see is scheduling and just like time to get it done. I especially see when people are going to the grocery store multiple times a week, you end up spending so much money and so much time in this meal planning that you actually don't like doing. I think it's easy to, if your schedule changed, something fell through, and now you have to come up with something on the fly, the ability to have things on hand that you can then throw together in a balanced meal is really important to save you the time and energy from otherwise maybe going out to fast food or something that is not really serving you in the long run. So those are some of the things that I see.
Oh, definitely. And if you hear me giggling in the background, it's because the things that Anna's sharing right now, these are all things. The decision fatigue was real. It's still sometimes real. This app has made so much of a difference in my life where, like, even yesterday after church, my mom's like, hey, y'all want to go to lunch? Absolutely. Where would you like to go? I said, I would like to be the one today that does not have any input in this decision. I would like for someone else to say, here's where we're going to go, or give me options, then I can choose, because I can't make another decision at all. It's like the whole, please tell me what to eat. That is real. I want someone to tell me what to eat, but then I don't want you to tell me what to eat.
Yes.
Like, I want options and I want to choose from those.
Exactly.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, that's exactly why I call my meal planning app meal guides instead of meal plans, because that was sort of the intersection that I found. It was really important to give my clients and even my friends who I was working with when I first started this, just the ideas. Here is a list of ideas. I've made sure that they're balanced. I've made sure that they taste good. I've done all of that work. They're varied, whatever. But then you are the author of your story and you get to decide, do I want to cook everything on this, or do I want to delete that and substitute tacos? Or do I want to pull something from my own recipe box in the cabinet or whatever? So ultimately, I think it is very important, whatever kind of meal plan that you're following, that it's really you who are making the ultimate decision and you feel the autonomy and authority over your life.
That's really helpful. And like some of the things I also struggled with, I will say there's this kind of before and after. And so before, when I was really in diet culture or struggling with eating disordered behaviors, there was so much restriction going on that I would just think about food all the time, what I was going to get. Everything sounded good. Some things sounded better than others. And sometimes I'd fantasize like I'm going to do this secret rendezvous to Taco Bell drive-thru or some drive-thru that I knew was on the way home. Sometimes it was if my husband went hunting and I didn't go that day, and I'm like, I'm going to get these foods that only I enjoy, like that they won't eat. I would always get too much and it was overkill. And then I would be miserable and feel shame and all of those things. And so it was like there was restriction in the past. Then once I've moved into like no restriction, food freedom, then all of a sudden, and it happened pretty quickly. It was like, just nothing really even sounds good ever. Day after day, nothing sounded good. And my husband, and I've talked about this on the show before, my husband and I, we would be like, what do you want to eat? I don't know. It sounds good to you. I don't know. Give me some options. Well, I don't know. What do you want? And it would just get to the point of like night after night, we would be doing this. Neither of us could make a decision because nothing sounded good to either of us. And so then it would be, then the overwhelm set in. There wasn't any kind of plan or preparation. And then I would feel a little bit overwhelmed because there wasn't a lot to choose from in the house. I didn't have a lot of pantry staples on hand. There are times when I know a lot of us, like my husband and I were just talking about, we never used to go to the store for two people, pay $200 for a week and a half's worth of groceries. Never. And so now it's like, your dollar doesn't go as far. And so sometimes you can't afford to get all the things that you would want. And then if you don't have a backup plan on hand, and then in like somewhere in your mind, even if you had to have true food scarcity, like this can happen too, but where you just feel deprived, and then that kind of feels like restriction. And there's overwhelm with my palate is more expansive than my husband's. And so then I feel a pressure. He's not putting it on me, but I feel a pressure as I'm normally the one that cooks the meals. And I've got to make sure he likes what we're eating. And I'm not sure that he's going to like all these more nourishing foods. Maybe he will. We got to have a conversation about that. But anyway, all of that to say, not to just overwhelm everyone from the start, but this is what this app helps with. And it's not from a place of diet culture. So just hear me say right away, that was a big concern. And it kind of scared me because I don't know meal type of apps outside of diet culture until now. And so, Anne, what would you say to all of that?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up so many good things, everything from picky eating to any form of restriction, whether it is self-imposed like in dieting or in a sense of food insecurity if you don't have enough of what you need or maybe the right groceries or whatever. So planning ahead, it's a tool. You know, there's a lot of tools that can either be used or misused. And I think meal planning is a really good example of that. I think diet culture has really co-opted it and they have taken away your autonomy and told you what to eat and disconnected from hunger cues. But actually on the flip side of it, meal planning can actually really support you in your intuitive eating journey because it allows you to use your dollar more wisely so that you can keep foods on hand that you know make you feel good, that you like, that you can plan ahead and include those cuisines that are your favorite. And so one of the things that you and I know we're talking about was like, what's the difference between meal planning for a diet versus like meal planning for intuitive eating? And I think a lot of it is around mindset and understanding that this tool is working for you and not being beholden to the tool, because that's kind of what diet culture does. They're like, here is this like X number calorie plan, and you need to fit into that mold regardless of what is going on in your life. And I am really trying to flip the script on that and say, no, this needs to work for you. So delete what you don't need, adjust your servings, plan, you know, have a little safety net for yourself, know what your backup plans are so that at the end of the month, if you didn't plan enough meals, you've at least got your favorite peanut butter and jelly in the fridge that you could have that's going to feel good to your soul and meet your nutritional needs.
I just love all that you said because it feels supportive. It feels good. It feels like I'm ready. And as you were talking, here's what I kept hearing and feeling and seeing, like I could envision this. People, we are in a battle. This is a battle. You are on the front lines battling. And if we can have that, we've talked about it before, Christ-centered authority, Christ-centered agency over our choices, our body, our health, and say, you know what? Actually, I am choosing to not be restrictive today. Maybe it's like, I don't even know if I can choose that all day, but I know I can choose in this one meal opportunity that's in front of me. I'm going to feel freedom. Like if I'm going into battle, I have this tool. I have planned and prepared. We got to be ready for that. And so what is God putting in your path to help make this easier? Because he didn't design food to be this hard. He did not design food to be like this. This is a trap from the enemy. We talk about it all the time. And so for him to give you, help you plan and prepare, not with rigid rules, but flexibility, freedom, trust that he can get you through.
I love what you were saying, like this analogy of a battle and choosing your tools, because I think what happens is when we get in a place of overwhelm, when we haven't prepared ahead of time, we're going to default to whatever coping mechanism we were using most recently, what we have been using. And if those coping mechanisms have not been serving us, if those coping mechanisms were related to diet or restriction or binging or whatever it was, then that's when we're going to move away from our values. Essentially, you're going to make a choice that is moving you farther away. And so using these tools, which can help you plan ahead, now you're equipped to make a decision that honors you and honors your values and helps move you forward on your plan. Something else you just said too, of each decision, each meal, you get to, it's like a clean slate. You get to make a new choice at each time. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to do everything right, to have the perfect pantry staples, to have the perfect meal plan, to have the perfect meal, to cook the perfect way. It's too much. And so I always go back to like, be better, not perfect. Just do better, not perfect.
Oh, that's
and
good. Yeah.
It feels hard because it is hard. There are a lot of decisions you're making. There's a lot of things that you're working through. And there's nothing wrong with you if some of this feels hard. It just is. So gather your tools, gather your allies, gather your people, and make a plan that works for you.
You don't know how helpful that is to someone like me struggling. When I first heard you say, it feels hard because it is hard, I'm like, she gets me. She hears me. She sees me. I'm not crazy. Like it felt so freeing. It really moved me in my soul. And friend, if it feels really hard to you, just remember that so many of us didn't grow up being taught by our parents, or even when the school system did their best to try to teach some type of nutrition with the food pyramid, they meant well. We had so many other messages that maybe we weren't raised in a well-balanced mealtime scenario. So it just takes time. We got to give ourselves grace and know that it takes time to relearn things that, for me, in 46 years, I'm having to like now relearn all these things and learn a better way and learn what works for me and what doesn't. Like something you just said made me think of just last week at a doctor's appointment, some information I was given, and this liaison nurse gal opened this pamphlet and it had a picture of two apples. One was smaller, one was larger, not even twice the size, but larger. And she pointed to this page and like put a sticky note, like this was a significant page I needed to remember. She said, you're going to now have to be a carb counter, and you're going to have to be very aware of what you're eating and how many carbs it has, because when you think you're going to eat an apple, you might choose a larger apple, but you need to choose the smaller one. And so I am skilled enough now to know red flag, like that's not helpful for me. But instantly, my first thought, I should avoid apples at all costs, because if I choose one that's too small or too big, it's going to wreck everything. But then in my mind, like in my guts, I was like, I will never be a carb counter. I'm not counting these things. And so like I was so kind. I didn't even say anything. I just nodded my head and just like filed that away of like, we're going to remove the sticker. But today, right before we recorded, I had apples, and they were all what I would consider larger than a tiny apple. And I'm just eating it with my peanut butter, pairing it well, and thinking this is going to nourish my body. And I'm actually eating an apple versus something that wouldn't make my body feel as well. So I'm going to be okay with that.
As a diabetes educator, I wish that that is an uncommon story, but unfortunately, it's one that I have had to uneducate and re-educate on many, many times. Like this idea that something as nourishing as fruit would not be good for you. You know, oftentimes it's not the tool that's wrong. It's just that that tool is not right for you. That's why I love the intuitive eating model so much, is because it walks you back to the why. And we have to start at the beginning in order to know what tools are right. And so, you know, this person was in good faith trying to give you good advice, which actually may have been helpful advice for another person. But because she didn't start with the beginning, she couldn't know what tools would be right and which tools might be harmful for you. And I wish that every educator had that knowledge, but unfortunately they don't, which I think is why it's so important for each of us as individuals to be able to advocate for ourselves and to be able to help look through that lens of, okay, I hear you giving me this tool. Is this tool going to be helpful and lead me down the right path? Or is this tool meant for someone else?
Yeah.
It helps to, I think, take a little bit of the judgment off too.
Back to that choose your own adventure book.
Yes, you are empowered to make the choice and to choose what's going to work best for you. And the good news is that if you stumble a little bit and the choice wasn't perfect, it doesn't really matter, because you can make the next right choice. You just learned something from this experience, and you just realized that, I mean, even take the apple, like, oh, maybe you realized that that particular apple was too much because now you felt too full. And so then next time you can make a different choice. And I'm not saying that that's true. Actually, an apple is a great choice.
And not throwing her under the bus either.
Mm-hmm.
It just was an example of like how it felt in me. And I was trying to have no judgment with her and have grace with her and with myself and my own feelings that were coming up. And remember, choose your own adventure book or Christ-centered agency over my choices. And sometimes it feels difficult to eat. I have a lot of noise going on. Sometimes the noise is louder than others. And just the thinking of like, okay, I can choose anything.
Yes.
Is this choice right now in this moment? Like, even if I choose something that ends up not making me feel great, like I didn't ruin everything. It's one choice. It's one day. And I can always start over, like as long as I have breath.
We give so much power to some of this.
Yeah.
I think we give sometimes too much power to some of these individual decisions. Patterns are so much more important than any one perfect decision. And so whenever you're in that moment, there's sort of like a hierarchy that I feel like if you're having a really hard day and it's just hard to nourish yourself, it's hard to like, there's so much food noise that you're like, I would just rather not deal with this. Remember that the most important thing to do is just to eat something because your body needs some kind of nourishment. And then we can move into okay, what do I eat? What sounds the best? What other foods have I eaten? What kind of balance am I missing? What nutrients would make me feel better? And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think you and I were talking before about, like my comfort meal. It's like a cheese quesadilla and a can of green beans because that fits the plate method. I've got my carb is the tortilla and the cheese is my protein and the can of green beans are my vegetables. And so often I think this is where that morality of food can be really harmful. Yeah. If you have already, moralized canned vegetables as something as not as nutritious, then all of a sudden now you're just missing out on them. Whereas something is better than nothing. Would it be great if I could go out to my garden and pick green beans and cook them fresh? Sure. But I'm not growing green beans in my garden. It is January, and so some of these convenience foods, it's important to have the convenience because those are also meeting a need.
Yeah.
There's just so much of this that goes into it. And that's part of why I've tried to design these menus to give people examples of how you can incorporate all of the foods in a way that's balanced. So there is white rice on the menu, which is like, especially coming from the diabetes world, like, a lot of people would never eat white rice. But spoiler alert, I'm a diabetes educator. I can show you how to include white rice in a meal that balances your blood sugar, gives you great energy for the rest of the day, and tastes delicious. So that's really one of my goals is like, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. So instead of saying you need to eat this, just here is your bouquet of options. Now you get to choose what you would like.
You said bouquet of options. My friend Jenna, when we go on girls' weekends, she always brings some bouquet of flowers. It's just girls. It's just maybe 2 or 3 girls, and she always brings a bouquet of flowers, and we get to enjoy them for the 3 days we're together in the lake and swimming and all the things. But when you said that, I was like, a bouquet, like it's so beautiful. And to think, like it was beautiful to me when you shared originally. You remember how I reacted when you said, sometimes my go-to meal is a cheese quesadilla and green beans. I'm like, holla! I didn't even know that was an option. Like that could be a possibility. And here you are, someone who knows what they're talking about in this realm. And it's like, not that you needed to give me permission, but like, I never thought that would have been okay. And I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? I'm learning new things and it feels freeing. Hey there, I'm so grateful that you are here and listening to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast. As always, you can find helpful links from today's episode in the show notes. I want to personally thank those of you who make this podcast possible. For over 20 years, Finding Balance has been helping people walk in freedom by finding Jesus in their struggles with food and body image. If you'd like to join others in supporting this ongoing work, you can do so in one of 3 ways. 1, leave a comment and review for the podcast on your preferred podcast app. 2, share the podcast with your network and friends on social media or via text and email. 3, this podcast is made possible because of generous donors. If you'd like to make a tax-deductible donation or become a monthly supporter, you can do so at findingbalance.com/donate. Our key scripture, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Galatians 5:1. So entering in the Peas and Hoppy meal guides. So I want you to tell us about the name. How did you come up with that name? Like the story and purpose behind it. I want you to tell us what this meal guide app is and what it isn't and how it helps. All these things go.
I'm so excited.
Yay.
So Peas and Hoppiness originated, of course, as a play on words of peace and happiness.
Yeah.
And it's a nod to my belief that all food and drink, the hoppiness is a nod to craft beer. I live in Colorado. And so at the time that I started my blog, I was actually brewing beer. And I have since realized that it's much easier to buy craft beer. It's very difficult
Then do all the other. Yeah.
Yes. But if you don't drink, that's fine. You're also welcome. Everybody is welcome to the table. Yeah. That's really the story. Peace and happiness around food, and everyone is welcome. I created the meal guides. There's several different reasons that I created them. Number one, it was because I was working with clients who had diabetes and who we would go through the plate method. We would talk about all of the different options, how you could fit any lifestyle in this that worked. And still they would leave my office and just like deer in headlights. Like it was just so overwhelming to be given a health diagnosis that food is such an integral part of, and then try to fit that into your lifestyle when you're also working and taking care of a family and trying to have a social life and trying to exercise and, do all of the things. And so I really wished that I could just go home with my patients and be like, here's an example of how to do it.
Yeah.
And I was telling one of my best friends, she's a music teacher and she also has a family. So I had started doing some meal planning with some one-on-one clients and just like sending them meal plans. And she was like, would you send that to me too? And I was like, sure, I'll send you my meal plan. And so it came from both wow, people really need this example of how to nourish their bodies, how to take care of them. And also people who don't even have a diagnosis, but are just trying to get dinner on the table, just need ideas. So that's how it was born. And it started with just me sending out PDFs of recipes. And now with the app, it allows the flexibility for you to customize it. That's always been really, really important to me. As you've probably heard when we're talking about, I truly believe that nothing is going to work for you perfectly. You have to be able to adjust it. And you have to have the skills to be able to say, oh my gosh, like my schedule changed tonight. So I need to flip-flop my meal plan. And tonight I'm going to make the grilled cheese sandwiches instead of the chicken breast that takes 45 minutes to cook or whatever it is. Here's the ideas, here's the nourishing recipes, and then here is your ability to change it how you need to. So I've also been very, very intentional to take out any diet language. You mentioned in my bio that I recently became a certified intuitive eating counselor. So I've always been drawn to an intuitive eating model, believing that the best wisdom comes from within, and the only real way that you can have peace with food and honestly nourish your body best is to be able to tune into your own body's needs. What makes you feel the best? How much do you need? And so as I became the intuitive eating counselor, then it became very important to me to take out any language related to any dieting things. So there's no skinny recipes. There are no superfoods. It's really designed to just tell you what the food is and let you make your decision about whether or not you want to include that.
Thank you on behalf of every listener and every user. Thank you, because that is really, really important. I mean, obviously, you know that because you did it, but it's helpful. Like I even struggle sometimes with the word healthy foods. Like I try to say nourishing because to me, eating in different ways is sometimes more nourishing to my body than others. But sometimes it's healthy to eat something that may be more processed than not eating at all. You know what I mean? And so it's like, even I have to have the balance. And
sometimes it's healthy to have
birthday cake.
Absolutely. Words have so much power. Eating healthy includes all of those social events. A huge part of health are your social connections. And so if we're not including those, we don't have a healthy, balanced diet. But you're right. Words have a lot of power. So I've really tried to be intentional about how I'm using words to describe food, both from like a cultural aspect, but also from a diet-free zone. And there are nutrition facts in the app with each of the recipes, but they are hidden. So that nutrition information, I felt that it was really important to include because working with patients with diabetes, some of them are actually taking medications based on what they were eating. And so for some people, numbers were important from a medical standpoint. But for most of us, being that specific about nutrition is actually not helpful. And I would argue really disconnects us from those internal cues. And so I would rather that most people don't see them at all. And just know that I've balanced the plate for you. Zoom out a little bit and think about the big picture and notice your hunger cues. And that is really going to help you nourish your body the best.
And it's so helpful because sometimes those numbers can be really triggering. So to have those hidden or know that I can, like, if I really need to be paying attention to sodium intake, I can see, but also there is this comfort in knowing you've already done the balancing for us. And it's so customizable. Like, this is the opposite of, we're not counting. It's not a meal tracker. That's not the design. With certain eating disorders, a lot of times we struggle with control. It's like we want to have control to the point of where it's out of balance, right? Where it's too much control and too black and white thinking. But what I love about this is it's so customizable. You take the guesswork. Like, I can search by, I want to see what shrimp recipes are out there. And I can search by, just search shrimp. And there's all these variety of shrimp recipes that you have. And if I don't like an ingredient, it doesn't mean I'm stuck with that. And now I have to go find something else. I can replace that ingredient or remove it altogether. Like, you have set this up for success. I can favorite things and have this whole area of favorites that I've already identified. So then later on, like, it takes a little bit of getting used to and work and exploration. It's more like exploration because at first I was like, oh, it's so overwhelming. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, ooh, this is fun. And it took a little time. Like, I carved out time to go through it. And then it was this exploring process. And then it like got the creative juices flowing. I'm like, oh, instead of shrimp, like, our family, we have the Louisiana roots and we love crawfish. And anytime I can make crawfish, we are making some kind of crawfish dish. And so I was giving Anna a hard time when I was like, you didn't have any crawfish recipes out there. And she's like, you could just replace the shrimp. I'm like, of course. So yeah, it just was so much fun to even just start the process. A little scary at first. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it was new.
I think that's normal. Absolutely. Things are hard when you first get started. And I think food especially is challenging because food is so culturally important to us. Like, we grew up eating a certain way. You just mentioned like the crawfish. And so anytime someone asks you to change that, there's like a little bit of fear involved, even if you are a very adventurous eater. And I also have to say that my experience finding recipes on the internet is that most of them are not good. Many recipes that you just randomly Google are either not well written, the instructions aren't clear, the ingredients are a little bit wonky. Something about them is weird. And so I have had so many recipes fail from just Googling or Pinterest or whatever. Yeah. And so I think that that's also why there's probably some of that innate fear when you're first trying some new recipes. You're like, is this really going to be good? But that's the beauty of the app, is that I wrote all of the recipes. I've tested all of them. And so I have already done the homework for you that the answer is yes. They will be balanced. They will taste good. They will have ingredients that you can find in your local grocery store. You don't have to go to 4 different specialty stores. Yeah. You can just flip over to your grocery list tab. I don't know if I said that, but the app makes your grocery list for you, which is the most time-saving feature that saves me every week. But I don't think you're alone. There is a little bit of fear when you're first getting started, and that's normal. So if you can trust the process just a little bit and try some of the recipes, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Absolutely, they will. And the visuals, you have pictures of everything. Like, she could have just said green beans, corn, cottage cheese. Most people know what those items look like, but every single item, I think even butter, like milk, you have a glass of milk, you got some butter, right? This picture, this visual appeal. And as I'm going through, like, I am starting to salivate as I'm looking at oven roasted garlic green beans that she also gives you options of, I can go to the farmer's market and get these fresh green beans that some farmer grew that I didn't have to grow, or I can like straight up freezer green beans. And I made these and they were so good. The house smelled good. My husband and I enjoyed them. Here's the other thing about the visual that I really love. Oh, I loved this. I had my laptop on my lap. I sat down on the sofa next to my husband and I'm like, hey, here are some meal items that I looked at that I saved in a favorites. Do any of these look good to you? And because he could see it and he'd be like, yeah, I like that, but obviously I don't like mushrooms. So mushrooms for you, not for me kind of thing. And it was visual. It took the guesswork. I didn't have to like worry. And when you're talking about like, I have made so many Pinterest meals over the years. Some have been really great, but when it flops, the shame I feel, I'm telling you, I feel so much shame. It is really hard for me to have worked hard to prepare a meal that I watch my family like choking it down. And I'm like, and I'll be sitting there saying,
oh, and it's not you. It's the recipe. It's not you.
I did my best. I'm like, do not choke this down. Feel free. Like we can go up the street and get something else. I don't know.
We've all been there. I've been there too. Yeah. Those meals are not included on the meal guides. Those did not make the test.
Yes.
I think that is one of the most common misconceptions about like, am I a good cook? You don't have to be a good cook to follow these recipes and to make great food. You just have to follow the instructions. Trust me, I've tested them on my husband who I was watching him. I will never forget this moment. He was testing one of my recipes and he was sauteing onions and he like typed into the timer in the microwave like 5 minutes. And I was like, what are you doing? He says, well, it says to saute the onions for 5 to 8 minutes. And I was like, I did not realize that some people would actually put a timer on that. That is great to know. Now I have made sure that all of the numbers on there are accurate because if you've never sauteed onions before, if you didn't grow up with a mom who taught you how to pick an onion from the grocery store or cut it or prepare it, it is so overwhelming. So those are some of the barriers that I'm trying to take out with these recipes. In each recipe, there's always a description of how to prepare the vegetable in the notes section. And then there's also a little pantry section in the app where you can go to find suggestions for what tools you might need. If you don't have an immersion blender and need a recommendation, you can go to the pantry and find it. And it also has actual videos of how to prepare these different vegetables. So if you've never cooked a butternut squash before, but it's winter and all the meal plans are written seasonally, and so we're using more winter squash because it's winter, you can flip over to the pantry, find how to make it, and be successful in making this new vegetable.
I love that you talked about the pantry section because like I think sometimes I have a pretty balanced, good pantry, but then this app is showing me that it's not as great as I thought. So there's like a section that shows some pantry staples and like, it's okay. Like I'm choosing my own adventure. I'm not fixing to eat Brussels sprouts at all. I have tried. Please know that I've tried. I wanted to like them. I can't do the smell. I can't do it. But I tried. So we know that. And that's not a pantry staple. But like I was thinking chia seeds, but somebody at church made these little overnight oats with chia seeds. And I'm like, okay, I've always wondered. Now I know I would do this. It really doesn't have a taste. It's fine. And if there's a health benefit, let's go. But I found that really helpful. And that you have, what is the section where you give some like details about ways to make this different?
Oh, the pro tips.
There we go. Pro tips.
Yes. And each recipe in the notes section, I have a little pro tip. And that's as if I were making this recipe with you and I wanted to tell you something about this recipe. So Chrissy, I know you're making this stir fry. And if your husband doesn't like the mushrooms, no problem. You can replace them with broccoli or onions or snap peas. And so in that notes section, sometimes it's a substitution. Sometimes it's a pro tip of how to make this faster. Like, hey, this like meatball spaghetti squash dish, here's the recipe of how to make the meatballs from scratch. But if you need something fast, go get some frozen meatballs and throw them in the crock pot.
You can bet I'm doing that.
Okay. Oh, it's so important to be able to have the freedom to use those sorts of processed ingredients to make your life easier so that you can be nourished. Yeah. And this is where that sort of like diet culture, black and white, you can't eat anything that's in the frozen section or only shop around the outside of the grocery store. I think that that really does such a disservice to those of us who are living real lives and are very busy and need an intersection between quick and easy, but also healthy. Those two things actually go together. Nourishing and fast and easy can be the same thing.
Yeah, which is so helpful. It's just really so helpful. After a long day of work, after kids' sporting activities, just feeling drained in general. Some people are in a stage like me of perimenopause, or some people are in menopause, and there's all these hormonal things, and it's like brain function is not at its peak level. And so, man, just having a tool like this is so helpful.
And maybe that's one of the things that I, kind of want to end on, is that like, you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
You don't have to walk this journey alone. You can ask your friend to help. You can ask your spouse to help. You can hire someone to help, or you can use a tool like an app or different tools to help you in the process. But please don't do it alone. We're not meant to live in isolation. We are meant to help other people.
Yeah.
And I went to a diabetes conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the presenters was talking about older people who are more isolated, who start to use the medical team as their community. And I always thought of that as a negative thing. But this person was like, it's okay. It's okay that like we are now part of their community. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. We just live in a really different world today than we used to. And many times we exchange money because this other person needs to also buy services. So it's okay if you pay someone money to come and help you. They are doing that also. Our community is just larger, and it doesn't make your community any less if you pay for a doula to help you with your birth, or if you pay for a trainer to help you with your fitness. Those are all part of your community.
Yeah. And when God has put skills and experience and given these other people knowledge and experience and skills to help, and it's for a season. So I would rather invest a little money into what is long-term sustainable rather than taking an injection once a week or twice a week and having to pay a copay and go through all the insurance hassle. Sometimes it's needed. Sometimes that's really needed. And who is God putting in your path that can help you?
Yeah, it's okay to not be an expert in everything. Yeah. We have such a wealth of information at our fingertips at all times that it is so overwhelming. And I think it gives us this false idea that we can be experts in everything. So like, if you just do enough research, then you don't have to go to the doctor, Chrissy, because you'll know all about your hormonal health and your diabetes and all of these things. And that is just not true. There's a medical professional who went through 8+ years of training to get to their level of expertise. And so I think that it's important to do research so that you can advocate for yourself and ask the right questions. But I would argue it's even more important to be able to identify experts who align with you, who understand and are able to walk back to that why, like we were talking about. So everything from finding the right doctor to finding the right nutrition professional to finding the right tools. It's okay to pay for it, and it's okay to go to someone else who is the expert. You don't have to do it all.
That's really helpful to hear, because let me tell you, I've been the researcher. I've been exploring. I listen to podcasts and watch videos and all the things. But when things really accelerated was when I had either one-on-one or group setting with a professional or someone who was skilled and knew more than I did and was trustworthy. And then I found connection and community and a team, and less like I was